Educational Webinar Series, which is hosted by Pleasant Valley Business Solutions. Today we're going to cover part 2 in this 3-part series of government contracting 2015 and beyond. The first part, which can be found on pvbs.net under past webinars, discuss recent changes in the DCAA and how they can affect your business. So today's webinar is going to discuss current trends in government contracting and what to expect in the future. So this webinar is being recorded and will be hosted or posted to our PVBS website later today. If you have any questions, you can post them in the questions section. And we'll try to get to those as we move along. If we cannot get to your question, we'll either contact you separately or try to get towards the end. So, also later today, you should receive an email invitation to take a post-webinar survey. We really appreciate any feedback that can help us make this a better learning tool for everyone. So please take a minute to answer a few questions from us. We really appreciate that. Today's agenda includes a brief introduction about your host, Pleasant Valley Business Solutions, and then our main topic, federal contracting trends, presented by Mr. Rob Rosenberger, currently serving as Congressional Fellow at the U.S. House of Representatives and former CEO of a mid-sized defense contractor. He's also a former special advisor to the Joint Chiefs of Staff and a former contracting officer in the intelligence community. So we're very honored to have him today. Pleasant Valley Business Solutions is a top-tier Microsoft Business Solutions partner, serving only the government contracting market. Our headquarters is just outside Washington, D.C. in Reston, Virginia, giving us unique access and insight into the GovCon community. As an experienced leader with over 12 years of success in the government contracting market and an intelligent innovator in the Microsoft systems, PVBS is a direct resource in both government contracting and Microsoft communities. Microsoft Dynamics NEV for government contractors from PVBS is a rich, robust accounting solution compliant with federal rules and regulations. It provides complete integration and ease of use. PVBS is driven to develop excellence in providing the most comprehensive solution to our customers and our partnership channels. If you're interested in seeing the solution, we will be holding a webinar demonstration tomorrow. You can find out more information on our website, pvbs.net, by clicking on the Resources tab. And again, I'll turn the presentation over to our featured presenter, Mr. Rob Rosenberger. Welcome.
Thanks, Damon. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks everyone for taking some time out of your day to dial in. Hopefully this will be meaningful to you as we all are interested in finding out what's going on currently in our industry and potentially how can we glean some of those data points to maybe hopefully give us an insight as to what to expect. Again, it's a pleasure to be here, and a few disclaimers up front. So what you'll see today is my culmination of data points and collection of information that I've personally put together, either by way of experience, by relationships of people that are either senior executives and key officials within the government or within the industry, or all the way down to practitioners on the floor. So again, these are my collections. You may have some of your own that may even differ. That's okay. I've tried to give you sort of the best and the most common denominator type information. With that said, going into the agenda, just to give you a heads up of how this is going to read, first I'm going to show you just a little bit. We're going to start at the top. So we're going to show you where the money is and where the money's been. We're going to try to break that down into budget trends. And then what you'll see is a pattern repeat itself throughout the presentation of basically observations. And then that leads into, well, what could be gleaned from that or suggestive in terms of a forecast? Recognizing that forecasts are simply that. We are making some estimated calculations as to what could happen. They are speculative in some point, and I'll try to highlight those. Next, we'll get down into some IT service because many of the people that are in this industry have some element or touch point within IT services. I'll try to give you some input and some insights as to where that might be going. Some IT bills that are currently being weighted in Congress that are pending, and then I'll kind of walk that down into the IT contracting landscape because I know, again, a large proportion of people have some reach into that landscape. Finally, we'll close with what you might be seeing in the realm of protests, again, observations and forecasts, and in conclusion, I'll give you a couple of recommendations on so what. So with that said, we'll go into the next slide. I will not try to read all of these slides. They're very full of data. I've tried to give you a lot of information in a tight space. So I will not try to give you every single data point there for your review and your reference later. With that said, Federal Budget 15. So as many of you may know, continuing resolution was passed and signed by the President in late September, right before Congress went on their recess. They will be back after Veterans Day. What that basically did, just to give you some understanding of what does that mean. Fiscal year started on October 1st for the government, and they did not have an official budget passed, and they did not have the budget worked out. So they've given themselves a bye. Otherwise, air quotes here, kicking the can, if many of you are familiar with that term. And that is that they've given themselves the authorization to continue as we've been doing until December 11th. Now, obviously, this is a midterm election cycle. Those elections will happen and then go into effect in January. So this was simply a way to keep the government running until they actually pass a budget, hopefully. Some of the current CR package highlights, I'm not going to read them all, but on the screen you can see there's basically 4 basic tenets, and one was spending levels. The CR keeps the discretionary spending levels relatively exactly the same as it was before, with some minor differences. Sure, there's going to be spending a little bit less here and there, and that's mostly so they can say they actually are spending less for the benefit of having that statement. But relatively speaking, it's the same as before. Export-Import Bank, Internet tax moratorium, that moratorium ends on November 1st, and it does need to be resolved or it needs to be extended. And then last is the OCO, the Overseas Contingency Operations Fund. That's the piece that goes on top of the DOD budget, and that is for overseas items. That's still yet to be resolved. An interesting point that I want to draw out here is Congress's job as the controller of the purse strings, their job, technically speaking, is to give us a budget for the government, the executive branch, to run itself on. And just by reference, the last time we actually had a complete budget that was passed by both the House and the Senate was when President Clinton was still in charge and Newt Gingrich was the Speaker of the House. That was in 1997. Since that point, we have operated largely by a repeated fashion of continuing resolutions, as well as the budgets that we have had have been omnibus, which are partial budgets. And then continuing resolutions have been really the mainstay since 2009. So since before iPads and iPods, we have been operating, relatively speaking, with a very thin document called a continuing resolution, which is not necessarily a budget as much as it's a policy bill that says, keep doing what you're doing until we have a better plan. Just from some data points. Next slide, sir. So this slide is pretty busy, and I don't want to confuse you or overwhelm you with a lot of complicated data, but I hope that you will glean just the suggestive highlights of what this data is referring to. So if you'll see in the top left corner, the graphic in the top left, that's federal spending. And as you can see in the red columns, they're steadily getting taller. And what that says is federal spending is not going down. It's projected to keep going up. But what are we spending the money on? If you'll see on the 3 graphics on the right, and starting with the top one, the slide there refers to the debt. So as you can see, we're steadily increasing the debt as we spend more. The bottom left-hand chart refers to spending. So spending compared to revenue is projected to continue to increase. But then there is a difference. And so in the middle graphic on the right-hand side refers to entitlements, or what's referred to as mandatory spending. And within that, you can see in the green is welfare, red is health care, and blue is pensions. And so that also includes things like Social Security as well as interest. And those things are relatively going to continue to increase year after year, or at least they're projected to. The kicker for some of us in the discretionary world and the government operations and government contract, the bottom right quadrant should really be telling. And that's defense spending. And defense spending is scheduled to get smaller over the time. And that's what we're going to talk about on the next slide. So again, from an interesting thing, and we're going to talk about on the next slide, is the bottom left graphic where it refers to percentage of GDP and spending versus revenue, you see that tall arrow that is the gulf between spending and revenue. That's the deficit. And next I'll talk about the deficit. Next slide, please. So these four graphics are a little bit busy, but leveraging off the previous graphics. So in the top left-hand corner, we have two basic categories of spending for the federal budget. We have mandatory spending and we have discretionary spending. As you can see from the graphic, and these I believe are 2013 numbers on the top left, roughly 2/3 of our budget was mandatory spending, and that included Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, welfare, interest, and those things. And those are not up for grabs in terms of what Congress wants to adjust right now. Those are much more complicated issues. What has been much more debated and had a lot more churn is the one on the right, which is everything else, and that's the discretionary spending. And as you can see, largely the biggest component of that is what's referred to as defense spending, which in 2013 was roughly 18% of our total budget. This is the number. If you actually shift all the way down to the quadrant on the bottom right, you can see that under this current administration, the intent has been to continue to decrease defense spending. Top right corner just gives you a relative comparison or an understanding of how big the total mandatory is as it relates to some of the others that you may be more common with or more familiar with. And the bottom left quadrant, the percentage of GDP, this is a little bit of a doom and gloom. I took this graphic from another site that has a lot of information on this, and relatively what they're projecting is that unless we make some significant modifications to how we want to run our country in terms of the economics and the budgets, right now we're on a glide path that is going to get very complicated as our mandatory spending requirements continue to increase, but our revenue is not going to keep up with that. So you can take a lot of your personal inferences from these graphics, but I think the message is for those of us in government contracts and the federal industries, that's the discretionary spending. That's the smaller column on the right, if you will, and that's where we're going to have to make our industries work within those budgets. Next slide, please. So in particular, reference to DoD spending, and this graphic is more of a historical look across time as to how has DoD had its spending. And sure, we've had low valleys and peaks and valleys with our federal defense spending across time. But there are some unique differences in this particular downsizing of discretionary spending, especially with defense. And some of those are a little bit unsettling if you kind of take things into perspective. And so what I'd like to say is, or recommend, as you look to the trough on the left, that was right after the Vietnam War. Comparatively, the next trough followed the Cold War. And then as you can see, there was a ramp up on the war on terror, and as you all know, we're going down now. The differences in this case is unlike before. These reduced budgets, before the reduced budgets were much more aligned with respect to our global strategic obligations, the sort of the matter and the state of the world as we thought we were accountable for it. Comparatively today, as you all know, if you watch the news or read any magazine, as you know, our strategic obligations are increasing. We have things like ISIS. We have things such as the Ebola things that are taking on a lot of our energy and our focus. We have cybersecurity. We have nation states that are increasingly becoming more dangerous. So our obligations as a strategic nation from a defense perspective compared to before are much, much greater compared to the budgets that we're saying we're going to give ourselves to be accountable for those strategic obligations. Perhaps most noticeably, that's the biggest difference in this case is why are we doing that? And the biggest reason we're doing that is because of the Budget Control Act that was passed in 2011. We are forcing ourselves to close the deficit spending. If you remember the graphic from a previous slide that showed the deficit between what we spend compared to how we make. The Budget Control Act was relatively designed and put in place to close that gap on deficit, not to address debt, but to address spend, rate of spend. And if Congress cannot come to an agreement, sequestration kicks in, which is where automatic cuts happen. The interesting thing about Budget Control Act, and many of you may know this, but this is the law that was established with budget enforcement mechanisms that are designed to reduce the federal budget deficits by a total of $2.1 trillion from the years of 2012 to 2021. $900 billion of that is to come off of yearly caps on discretionary appropriations. The provisions of BCA are projected to bring discretionary spending as a share of GDP well below what we've ever seen in past decades. So in terms of real dollars, adjusting for inflation and not for the population or growth, discretionary-based spending is slated to revert to levels that were slightly above where we were in 2007 as you look on this graph. Okay, next slide, please. This slide is a slide I found, and it's only to be a reference point for those of you that are doing business either in an agency or with an agency. And so one of the unique qualifiers of BCA, the Budget Control Act, is what it says is under a continuing resolution, is the agencies are allowed to spend what they spent last year, and that's a pretty loose description, by the way, with a caveat that it cannot exceed the least of the President's budget or the House-approved budget or the Senate-approved budget. So as you look across these agencies of what is planned for 2015, you can see that there are some slight differences compared to the President's budget, the House, and the Senate. And so what the CR basically gives the inference to these agencies is they're not to spend more than the least amount of these three columns. For those of us in this industry, we can relatively expect more of the same for 2015 right now, and these are just sort of some indicators of where that's going to play out. In general speaking, we're flat. We've been flat for 13, 14, and now 15 will be relatively flat, no major changes. Slide. So this goes into federal budget trends, and we'll start off again with the model that I referred to of showing you observations followed by forecasts. I will not read all of these data points to you, but I'll try to hit some of the highlights. And mostly starting at the top, the Budget Control Act of 2011 basically had two primary purposes. It was to increase the debt limit by $400 billion, as well as to decrease deficit spending. The bill directly specified $917 billion over 10 years in exchange for the debt limit to be increased by $900 billion. Basically, it says that sequestration will go into effect over the years of 2016 to 2021. Again, to repeat, sequestration is the automatic cuts when Congress can't agree with itself to actually define a budget and approve that budget and to authorize it. The sequestration kicks in. Congress gave themselves a buy for 2014 and 2015, and they slightly modified or softened the blow, if you will, on the cuts for those years. They also basically did the government and the contractor industry a favor by projecting or inferring or locking in what could be expected. So what they gave us was they gave us certainty. They gave us predictability. And with that certainty and predictability, we can operate much more effectively. We can define what our priorities are. We can define what our priorities are not. We can identify where is the most bang for the buck when we have things that we can plan for and can rationally understand. It's the subtraction or the extraction of having that certainty in our budgeteering that really creates chaos, because this automatic sequestration of cuts causes some very dysfunctional acrobatics that none of us enjoy. The Budget Control Act, you could make the argument that it is working or has had an impact by the fact that our most recent deficit was reduced to $468 billion compared to a maximum of $1.4 trillion in 2009. Last year, we were a little over $600 billion, actually almost $700. But the idea is the sequestration and Budget Control Act is meant to decrease that deficit. There is, for FY16 through 21, it's all hands off. Who knows what we're going to expect. The drivers are to keep cutting the deficit, but again, the real kickers and the hardships are going to come in the FY16 and beyond years for the budget, as well as the deficit control. Because while we gave ourselves a 2-year break, we still have to catch up to those big numbers of cuts over that 10-year span, which end in 2021. So that said, FY16 through 21, they're going to kind of really go aggressive, or they should, if they're going to believe in their own law, and that's going to get real creative and potentially drive a lot of change. Scrolling down, another interesting thing is the budget that was put forth by DoD for FY15. Not only was it referencing or trying to accomplish a roughly $20 billion cut, Congress didn't agree with DoD, and some of the things that DoD wanted to cut, such as some old, outdated weapon systems and programs, Congress didn't agree and did not let them cut those things. So those push and tugs are happening, if you will, on the Hill, and we're not sure where that's going to lead, but I thought it was important to make you aware of it. Scrolling down, the estimate for the Ebola crisis is roughly estimated at $750 million. Comparatively speaking, this is a very small number, but it is something that we are seeing a new surprise or spike of costs that are coming in. Next slide, please. Talking about forecasts for the budget trends. So one is I would expect completely, I have no faith that Congress is going to change its pattern of continuing resolutions. Since they've been doing that for decades, they've been doing it almost explicitly for the last 5 years. I have no indication or evidence that says they're going to stop doing that. And so what that's going to do, that's going to continue the pattern, if you will, of hedging bets, agencies having a lot of uncertainty, and we're going to have to kind of continue to make that work until Congress radically transforms the way it approaches its budget definition in the first place. For this particular CR that lasts currently through December of 11th, if this is short, then I believe currently the impacts are going to be minimal in 2015. I believe 2015 will be relatively flat. It will be very similar to last year. FY16 is the kicker, and it's the wild card. I have no idea how they're going to get on top of some of the things that they've assigned themselves in terms of challenges. CRs are still disruptive. I don't want to make light of that, but relatively speaking, they will be minimal by comparison. Don't know how long they're going to take to resolve the budget. They could potentially resolve it this session in the lame duck. Unlikely, but possible. Otherwise, they'll solve it in January when the new members come on board. Either way, the longer they take to define a budget or to make a decision, our complexity grows. And we run out of time because we work with very aggressive deadlines. As discretionary budgets will continue to fall, I predict that so will the demand for defense operations and readiness. There will just be a lot of things that they cannot afford. Training, supplies, services, there will just be a lesser demand. There are troops that are being planned for downsizing, and I'll talk to that later. And as those troops decrease, so will the demand for the services that support them. Again, I've already said FY16 budgets are significantly challenging, as well as each subsequent year after that. I suspect that there will be a lot of churn, if you will, on the Hill. It's difficult to project how this is going to play out other than those of us in industry, we need to make best with the information we have and to leverage our industries much smarter than we have before. Finally, I would say the midterms elections are going to have a minimal impact on the 15 budget, as I've already stated. I think that potentially if the Republicans do take the Senate, as some people believe is possible, I would look for an omnibus bill to come out relatively quick. They will give us something pretty fast out of the gate. It's my projection. I am speculating. An interesting detail, too, is just to make you aware of it, Senator Levin, who is the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, is retiring. The minority ranking member is Senator McCain. Senator McCain could potentially become the chairman. However, just as a backdrop, he has not always been that favorable to the contractor community. So what does that mean? I don't know, other than to be aware of it. Next slide. Federal contracting trends, observations. A detail that some of us should be aware of is under continuing resolutions, although it is relatively a buy or it's a policy that allows us to continue as last year with less or little definition of what that means. There is one thing it does mean, and that is no new projects or programs are allowed to be started without the approval of Congress. Well, what exactly is new work? As we've gone through the practice of living like this for a repeated cycle, the agencies themselves have been becoming increasingly creative as to what they refer to as new. So, for example, if you potentially in the FY2014 year were to take a can of paint and you were to swipe a stroke of paint on the wall and say, I'm going to come back and finish this next year, is that relatively new work? Forgive the jest, but you get the idea. The idea is that they're getting very creative on what is new and what is follow-on, and they're having to find ways to work with that. But the rules are relatively static. Now, so an interesting thing is as we all have known, task orders, GWACs, MACs, IDIQs, those have all become increasingly utilized across the industry. The government likes to use them. Industry is noticing that. We're all trying to get on those vehicles. But one of the interesting reasons, it's not the only, but one of the interesting reasons that drive a lot of that preferred use is, according to the rules of CR, any task orders that are deployed against these vehicles, these IDIQs, GWACs, MACs, etc., the agencies are not considering that new work. They consider that existing. Therefore, they are using these vehicles more and more and more to sustain their way of life and their daily operations. Again, if there's no projected change in the CR methodology, then I would project that the increased usage of these vehicles will only increase proportionally. Another thing to highlight is we all remember, or we all know that DOT spends more on services than it does on stuff. And as they do that, they're going to increasingly not only use these large vehicles, but I believe that they will basically use these service contract platforms for just about anything they have to do, including completion-type projects. Typically, those don't go together. You don't put completion-oriented, project milestone-oriented contracts on a service delivery type SOA or service agreement type contract. I predict that they will have no choice. They will continue to use all types of contract and project types that will go more to their services. And so watch those budgets, if you will, because those are relatively set, and those numbers are basically what's being controlled. So how will that roll out in terms of how DOD and the federal government uses these service delivery platforms to accomplish all these other work? I don't know, but I would watch them. As we all know, another highlight down below is you'll notice that as we've had the reduction since 2008, we've lost approximately 14% of the defense contractor industry. That's approximately 70,000 contractor workforce individuals that are no longer in that contractor workforce. As we are looking at things, even though this is a flat year, my goal or my data is telling me that pattern is going to continue. Companies are hunkering down. They're not investing. That uncertainty factor, if you will, has them being very cautious, very conservative. They're not putting their money in their employees and training, and that workforce is changing. Go back to how the government's going to handle this with the prominence of LPTA, where basically technically acceptable has translated more profoundly to the lowest price. We're going to continue to see that for now. I have no evidence that says they're going to change. I know many people don't like that particular model, and we all know that there's enough data and media out there that shows where this is not a healthy practice to be in. Nonetheless, I have no information or evidence that says they're going to change. What will change is time and material contracts are less in favor. So you will see them less and less, I believe, over the course of time. And as we're looking at IT services, I believe that the pattern or the models we've seen lately, contractors are bidding roughly 50% of what the previous incumbent was. And they're bidding it with cheaper labor, with lesser qualified people. That trend seems to repeat itself over time. Forecasting trends?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
No, I transferred it for you.
Forecasting contracting trends. Again, unless Congress changes its ways, our budget uncertainties and budget acrobats are going to continue. I believe that it is absolutely critical that Congress is going to have to come to terms and grasp the Budget Control Act issues post-2015, because, again, the problems do not get easier. Our strategic obligations are not getting less. Our problems that we are assigning ourselves as sort of what we're accountable for as a nation, as a governance, as a body of people in a society, as to our other nation partners, those things are getting very complicated, and our obligations require some real good stability in terms of our budgets. I believe Congress has got to get on board with solving that soon. The task order continues. The vehicles, you will only see them prominently keep playing themselves out. More people will try to get on those vehicles or become subs to them. I believe that that's where the industry is going to have the most lifespan, if you will. The government risk-averse culture is going to continue. The government contracting officers and the PMs will continue a pattern of what we've seen lately, and that is the least they can say to industry, if you will, the better in their mind. They do not like to take on risks that they believe that they don't understand or, frankly, are unnecessary. That creates a lot of uncertainties and lack of confidence on the bidder side, but I believe that that's going to continue. My recommendation is to leverage those relationships now, build up while we're in this quiet time, if you will, in the fiscal cycle, create leverage relationships, penetrate places that you haven't been before, and really, really expand your relationships across industry. There's some new things. If you look up GSA created a thing called 18F. U.S. Digital Service is created by OMB. Homeland or Health and Human Services created what they call the Buyers Club. These are internal government little think tanks or creative bodies, if you will, that are supposed to be, I don't know, maybe an extension of a CIO. But their idea is to be internal sources of creativity and inventiveness. I would say that since the creation and deployment of these three entities, as similar as they are to one another, I would project that other agencies are going to maybe mimic this model. And those, I don't know how they're going to play a role in the acquisition cycle. Maybe they have a great role to play, and you can go leverage it, yet to be determined. But I project that you will see more of these types of little institutions develop, and we'll see how much they shape or influence acquisitions. Last, for firms that are providing consulting services related to government business protocols improvements, improving their cost spends, bang for buck, as well as just improving their enterprise performances. I believe that there's a trending upward right now on those types of business lines. If you're in those business lines, or you can somehow tie those to your existing, like from a strategic alliance with another firm, I believe that the government will increasingly need that type of external input to help them become more efficient. Next slide. Influences on federal opportunities observations. I believe we've all seen there's an increasing sensitivity to cost and price, and really what that has done is has driven the profit levels down. I can personally remember from my own experience, it wasn't that long ago, within a decade, where we were seeing profit margins almost double where they are now. At the time, we did a lot more reliance on independent government cost estimates, which were a way of trying to determine the element of risk that the contractor would have to perform that task for that service. And then the profit was intended to be more commensurate with the level of risk. What we now have seen is the profit margins have thinned. The cost of doing business has gone up. So taxes, Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, there has been a steady demand for increased business operations, if you will, with a thinner margin line on the profit side. I believe that pattern, again, is probably going to, we're going to keep seeing that pattern. And what that's going to do is as the risk continues to move more to the contractors, the contractors are going to experience more delays and potentially more errors. And this also leads us into the subject of OCI. And I believe OCI, again, with that risk-averse culture, it really is, you're either all in or you're all out. The mitigation plans for OCI, from my personal experience, have become just less tenable for discussion. I've seen agencies, technically, if they believe that you fall on one side or the other, you can bid or you can't bid, but mitigation strategies have been a little bit on the downturn. There is a definite upswelling in DCAA and DCMA auditing, and as the auditing is increasing across the contracts, that is driving businesses to make bigger investments into having more robust systems and more accountable infrastructure that allows them to operate with those vehicles, such as cost plus time and materials, et cetera, that are going to be audited. I've noticed a big upswing in that. Again, that's driving how industry is having to manage itself. I guess the final point is I think as federal contracting continues to be harder to reach from an industry perspective, tell us what hurts, tell us what you want, how can I help, as those dialogues diminish or as they sort of shrink over time, I believe that that's going to potentially create dilution of partnerships. It adds to the gap, if you will, between the, and it makes more of an us versus them. And that lack of congruity will weaken bidder confidence. If the bidders have to have relatively, when it comes to the bid, no bid decision, as we know, bidders have to know, do I believe I have a shot at winning this? And that comes back to how well do we understand the requirement and how much do we believe we've got the winning solution. As that bidder confidence erodes, I believe that that will change some of the bidding profiles that we've seen. In this day and age, none of us can be reckless with our budget and proposal budgets, and so we're going to be much more judicious and careful about what we bid. So again, either go and build those relationships and get that bidder confidence, or run the risk of what I'm projecting here. Next slide, please.
And we did have a question that came in, and I'll ask it now while we're going into the forecasting. As far as last year, we went through the sequestration, and we're doing the CR again and again, developing patterns. Do you see a pattern developing with sequestration, maybe repeating this year or years coming?
That's a great question, and all of us would love to know that. So I don't know the answer is the correct answer. If I were speculating, I think sequestration was designed to be that sort of virtual landmine, if you will, that everybody wants to avoid. It is the teeth in the law that says if you don't get your act together, bad things happen. Can we see a repeat of that? Absolutely. I have no evidence to say that we don't. Some of these midterm elections may play out and may have an influence on, for example, if the Republicans take the Senate and now you have Republicans across Congress, could that influence better working together? I would hope so. And even if they don't take the Senate, I still hope that the intent behind sequestration, which is bad things, is enough of a motivator for them to resolve the differences that they have. So can we see it again? I certainly hope not, but until the Budget Control Act expires, we are always at risk of seeing it any time government does not either agree with themselves with a budget or does not input or put in place a CR. Hopefully I've answered that question. Influences on federal opportunities with respect to forecasts. And again, these are just my estimates, my calculations, my amalgamation of what I believe is possible. I think that you should expect the market landscape to keep changing as the large-scale integrators are finding it harder and harder to find food. As they do that, they are reorging, they are cutting costs, their programs are getting canceled, some of their programs are getting recompeted in terms of in bits and pieces and increments. They aren't giving the big splash programs quite the way they were. Contracts are being negotiated differently than they were. Some work is going out of the large community into the small business community from a set-aside perspective. As we've already discussed, a lot of work is getting migrated or transferred over to the vehicles where maybe they weren't on vehicles before, and now they are. So I believe you're going to see a lot of movement, if you will, from the big and the medium guys who are really going to be very aggressive at trying to defend and hold on to as much work as they can. And as they do that, all that thrashing around from the big guys is going to make a lot of waves in the pool. I think the government is going to continue to its methodology, and it's public about this. They want to extract the most amount of value for every dollar they spend. They're scrutinizing much more about what the contractor is proposing, the contractor's processes, the people, the hiring. How do you keep your people certified? What's the auditability of your numbers? I believe you're seeing a significant increase, and will continue to see this increase of government looking over the wall into our world as a contractor community, because they want to know what we're doing, and they're going to scrutinize it, and they're going to use that information to sway or to influence their decisions going forward. I believe that poorly performing programs across all domains are going to be scrapped. What is a poorly performing program? Well, that's up to each agency to figure out. But as resources get constrained, they're going to have to kind of reconcile what is important and, frankly, what can be retrofitted or uplifted, and, frankly, what is a high probability of being turned off or consolidated. I believe the data is showing that right now Army and the Marine Corps are spending less. There's a lot of data points on this. You may have data points countering that, but my data says that they're spending less. And as they spend less, I believe that there are other agencies, maybe not the front burner guys, but lesser known agencies. If they don't have really profound, really defined, high profile contributions to the overall executive branch, I believe you'll see them spend less and less and less too. Zero-sum game. Congress will still try to put the money in the biggest areas that it thinks it needs, and we talk about those strategic obligations. So a lot of the agencies that take on much of these strategic obligations, it's only a handful. You see Department of Agriculture, you see DOD, you see DHS, you see, out of the many agencies, what we see is really there's only a portion of them that seem to handle the majority of those strategic obligations. If that pattern continues, look at those proportion or those majority of those agencies to keep taking on the lion's share of the strategic obligations, and lesser known or lesser profiled agencies will probably bear the brunt of that. I think finally, as you see the reductions in the Army and Marine Corps uniform personnel, I believe that so in turn will you see a reduction in their need for things, and this will go across the board. This will be for resources. This will be for weapons. It will go into project management. It will probably touch IT. Look to them to leverage themselves in new ways. One of them is, we haven't talked about it yet, is JIE, the Joint Interoperability Environment. They're going to potentially really try to leverage that. They'll hand the requirements and their money over to DISA, and hopefully DISA will help them get more bang for buck, but Army basically is going to get out of its IT business in a way of speaking. Next slide, please. And that's a segue into the next slide, which is what I believe are some IT service business trends that you can potentially see. On the left, I've tried to put them in basically three different categories. On the left, you'll see the column of technical domains, project types, RFPs, and proposals. And then the columns are trending downward and then trending upward on the far right column. Again, these are argumentative. They're subjective. But I believe that there is enough momentum to kind of make the reference or suggestion that these are some trends downward. I don't need to read them all. You can do this. You have your own experience. But the large, disconnected, isolated, I'm going to do it my way kind of programs in the technical fields, those are much lesser so than they were before. You're seeing a consolidation of effort. You're seeing bigger collaboration. You're seeing an increased leveraging, if you will, from agencies and services and co-coms even, where they are trying to work more together, if you will. As you look across the technical domains, some of the highlights of things I think are increasing. This is probably not new to anyone. Some highlights would be, this is not all inclusive. I think cloud services, it's obvious that we're going to increasingly move to that. Cybersecurity, insider threats, that is going to be a rich area of requirements for the government for a long time. Enterprise mobility, mobile device management, enterprise mobile solutions, and mobile security, I believe we're at the beginning of that. That is going to continue to really build and create momentum over time. And it ties back to some of these other technical areas. Big data, storage of data, analytics, especially predictive analytics. These are going to be emerging fields. They already have been. I think more is to follow. I would also say military health and veterans affairs and some of the health IT. I believe that those, going back to that discretionary spending model, some of that Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security budget that is continuing to be spent could potentially bleed off or have a side effect, if you will, from a government perspective. And I think that money could be going into those fields. Project types, I believe you're going to see increasing need of COTS, open source solutions. Agile is definitely replacing waterfall. I realize that they say Agile, they get waterfall, they like waterfall, but I believe the benefits are pretty profound, and it's only a matter of time before Agile truly does become the norm, if it isn't already there. I believe that you're going to see fewer and fewer single source awards on the big programs. I think the sole source awards, though they have been increasing since 2008, I believe they're on a downtrend because competition is good. We now have created a market where competition is going to be very prevalent. You're going to see more bidders per opportunity than perhaps you've ever seen. And so with that, I believe that the big big splash programs and the sole sources are going to probably take a downturn. On terms of RFPs and proposals, the quick turnarounds, hey, it is what it is. None of us like them, but I think that model, because we've done it and because it's worked, we will continue to have to do that, as painful as it is. The GSA schedules have been consolidated because, as some of you are probably aware, there were many of them. Many vendors were on multiple schedules, so there has been an initiative to consolidate, to streamline. I think that will change some buying patterns, maybe in a good way, because customers now, government clients, have one place to go or fewer places to go, as opposed to which schedule do I need to go to get X. I think that the vehicles will continue to see a lot more use. And then finally, I think teaming is more important than ever. I think that your big, fat teams with lots and lots of subcontractors is going to streamline. I think that there will be fewer subs allowed on the teams because work share is real. Everybody has to have some belief that they're going to get work share. Just being on more vehicles, even though I'm telling you get on more vehicles, just being on the vehicle doesn't pay your bills. You have to have a shot at getting some work. So I think that there's going to be a little bit of a survivalist game being played out here. Next one. 5 key IT bills and Congress spending. Oh, did you have a question?
No.
5 key IT bills that are pending in Congress as we speak. I'm not going to read them. I'll just give you the 5 highlights. One is what's called FATARA, the Federal IT Acquisition Reform Act. If you're not familiar with it, I recommend you go look into it. It may interest you. The next would be the Reforming Federal Procurement of IT Act. They're just trying to make it easier for new entrants to come into the market. The Electronic Communications Privacy Act Amendments Act. That's fun to say. Next is the Cybersecurity Information Security Act of 2014. This is where I believe it was led by Feinstein, but basically where they're trying to increase information sharing from industry to government from a cybersecurity perspective. Many people don't believe this has a chance in where, but hey, it is a bill that's being considered, and potentially it has merit. I don't know. The fifth would be the Federal Spectrum Incentives Act. If you are not familiar with those, I invite you to go look into them or potentially reach out to your representatives if you have a position on that. Next slide. Federal IT landscape in terms of federal IT contracting. If you talk to the government, they say that they are seeing a downturn in the skilled IT workforce. There is aging. The same old people that have been doing it are still doing it. Their prices have sort of price creep. And then people are not finding the careers, if you will, as incentivizing in the federal contractor workspace or federal government spaces as perhaps they have in the past. So you're seeing lesser people seek careers in the IT contracting workspace because comparatively they believe their opportunity costs are greater. And with a downturn in investment in training, as the government is doing more with less, and that rolls down and ripple effects into contractors, you can see where this may be having an impact on our community. An interesting detail here, I don't have all the details, but the second bullet where recently the White House simulated a program where they're giving 450 or driving 450 million in grants to community colleges across the nation to increase job training, and they're working in conjunction with a number of firms. Some of them are listed here: Lockheed, Raytheon, Booz Allen, SpaceX, where they're trying to basically the government is trying to make investments in a new skilled labor force. And Maryland is actually the Maryland Cyber Technology Job Pathways Consortium is slotted to get 15 million of that because they're trying to build or upscale their IT talent pools in the Maryland area, Fort Meade particularly, in a cyber perspective. I think that investment will be certainly embraced. The trick is can we find jobs and contracts for those people to deploy? I think you're going to see the huge maintenance cost of legacy systems is currently it's almost a catch-22. It's killing the innovation budget. At some point, they're going to have to reconcile the two, let go of the old to get to the new. At the moment, it's a struggle. I think that's going to potentially spark or spur or provoke more agency relations and collaboration. I think that the pools of cleared contractor workforce, especially in the IT, that's a finite pool, and those of us that are in that industry know that. Staffing contracts with the right skill sets, with the right clearances, in a timely or responsive way, it's been challenging. It will still be challenging. There is actually an initiative right now that is being done by Office of Personnel Management. It's leading it. They're working with the Intel community and with the DoD as well as with Congress. They're trying to basically streamline and cut back the number of clear personnel. Potentially the reason is, or many of the reasons that are driving that is they believe the government overclassifies its material, which draws this bigger need for cleared personnel. So they're going to cut personnel with clearances. I project that you'll see that in the future. The federal market's experiencing a huge growth in the amount of data. It's consolidating, which is meaning the government's big data is not just volume but variety. I think you'll see that continue to play itself out. And then last but not least, effective July 1st of this year, CPARs are being consolidated and improved. There's a new way that CPARs are going to be done, and really this is good for the contractor community as well as it's a double-edged sword because now more agencies will see more streamlined, more standardized, more data than perhaps they ever did before. And so if you have bad CPARs, more people will know it. If you have good ones, same thing. Next slide, please. So forecast. I think the pre-RFP timelines are going to get further and further apart. You're going to see timelines draw out. Agencies will continue to seek cost reduction. I believe the intelligence community is going to continue its pattern of seeking more with less through innovation. I think You'll see the M&A market play itself out as agencies, or pardon me, industries will be selling off and divesting business units that are not making money for them. They'll be spinning them off. You'll see a lot of movement across that industry. And then the changes to CPARs will influence buying habits. Last slide. This is a slide. I will not read them. Top 20 contracts for 2015. I did take this off of a different source. You can go there yourself. These are just projected. Shows you by agency, shows you volume, and some of them are recompetes. Next slide. Protest. So what am I seeing? I'm seeing with an increased competition in the landscape, I'm seeing an increase in protest. Incumbents are fiercely defending their territory, and new bidders are trying to get in on that. The old era where there's a stigma associated with filing a protest or putting a finger in the government's eye, I think that that is less and less as long as it's not frivolous. Next slide. I think forecast for protests, to wrap this up, you will see more protests. Be prepared for that. And then at the bottom of the slide, if you'll look at this last bullet where it says traditional playing fields of core bidders, I'm seeing a change in dynamics of who's bidding. So for example, I gave two examples there that you can read. You're seeing industry or companies that were previously not bidding on a particular field of opportunity. They're offering complete service solutions, complete turnkey, if you will. And I think that you're bringing new competitors to markets where they haven't been, and that's going to potentially drive more protest. Either the new innovative solution guy who doesn't win thinks he should have, or the incumbent that got knocked out thinks he shouldn't have lost. And I think that that could potentially have an impact. Next slide. Recommendations. I'll fly through these. There are 6 of them. Have a good plan, implement the plan, repeat. If you have questions on that, you'll be able to reach me privately. This is what I do. I help organizations figure that out. Execute your plan flawlessly. Everyone is a target in this market, so play well, play smart. Do your homework. Be careful what you wish for. Do not spend more money to go either win or keep a contract that will be more expensive than it's worth to have. Aggressive bidding is expected. Be careful on what you go after. What got you here will not get you there. Keep fresh, exploit your economy to scale, be lean and mean, but also be differentiated, which I talked to at the bottom. Tune out the distractions. Don't try to be everything to everyone. Don't try to be the all-source bidder. You will only dilute your potential P-win for your opportunities, and no one can afford to be reckless with our B&P. Finally, is differentiate. Avoid being an us-too firm. Teaming is more important now than ever. Pick the right teammates for the right reasons. That's it.
All right, Rob. Well, we really appreciate it. There's a lot of information. I know we're running out of time. There's a couple questions that came in. I'm going to have to allow you to answer those separately. One of the questions that did come in, though, several folks asked if they can get copies of the slides. I will leave that up to you, Rob. You can contact Rob. Here's his email address, rob@rosenberger.expert, or you can go to his website or his LinkedIn profile and connect with him. I'm sure he'd be happy to do that and answer some of the questions that you have for him on a more personal level. All right? Absolutely. So for PVBS, this concludes today's webinar. We do have a couple things coming up tomorrow. There's a product demo, as I mentioned before. You can go to our website, pvbs.net, and click under Resources, and we'd be happy to show you the Microsoft Dynamics NAV for government contractors. That's a great product. We'd be happy to see it. We'll also be at Maggiano's Tyson's Corner on the 28th if you want to come and join us for lunch. If you're local here in the D.C., Virginia, Maryland area, and like to come out to Maggiano's Tyson's Corner, have lunch with us, and we'll give you a demonstration of the product live, and you can talk with our clients and ask any questions that you have. The next webinar in the series that will be November 19th, and it's doing business with the Department of Homeland Security. So we have a gentleman who works for the Department of Homeland Security who's going to come here, talk to you about all the umbrellas with FEMA and ICE and Coast Guard and everything that falls under the Department of Homeland Security and how to actually do business with them on the small side, medium side, and the large side as well. And I know I'm running fast because we did run out of time, but we want to thank you for joining us today. We want to thank our presenter, Mr. Rob Rosenberger.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. And hopefully we'll see everyone at the next webinar. Thank you very much. Take care.